right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the American Theater Critics and Journalists Association's convening here in New York. It is my profound pleasure and privilege to introduce the presentation of the Edward Medina Prize for Excellence in Cultural Criticism. Before we present the award to this year's winner, Christian Lewis, I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about this award. The Eddie, as I like to call it, I'm gonna have that name take off, I swear, guys, really came about, shortly after my husband's passing about 3.5 years ago. Kalundra Smith gave me a call and was like, we really need to do something, not just to make sure that Edward is remembered within the theatrical criticism community, but also because his mission, for those of you who knew him while he was here, was really to expand access and provide an open door for younger critics, for critics of color, for critics with diverse experiences, so that they could come and share their perspectives on the really important new work that we are very lucky to have in this city and then also all across the country. Because without their perspectives and without the voices that they bring to the shows that they see, there really would be less work that actually gets picked up and then produced throughout the country. We know that critics who have a diverse background, critics who can bring all of themselves into the shows that they are reviewing and provide that cultural context, really make a difference, not just in the landscape of arts journalism, but have a profound difference in the shows that kids get to see all across the country and the dreams that they're able to dream. And this was something that was so important to Edward. So the fact that this is the 3rd year of this prize and that it has grown every year and that we have had incredible applicants year after year, and that I am able to present this prize along with my esteemed co-chair of the BEID committee, Liz Kramer. I just want to say thank you to everyone. This is the highlight of my year, every single year. And without further ado, I will pass the mic over to Liz.
First of all, I just want to thank Nate and Kalundra for all of their hard work on this, and being part of the BEID committee, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity is so important to our culture, to the art form, and to critics, and especially to nurture this among young critics, to give them voices, and to support those voices and the networking. And I just want to thank Nate and Kalundra for their hard work. It's been wonderful working on this prize for the last 3 years, and to have it grow and to have this live stream be part of this every year. There's just a little bit extra that we push for to make it stronger. And thank you so much for everything. So without further ado.
And one last round of thanks. I want to give a huge shout out to HowlRound, who is helping with the live stream today. You guys are amazing. I also want to thank our donors, our sponsors for the award, Critical Minded Community, and the ATCA Foundation. Without this, we would not be able to provide the monetary support, which is so impactful to the wonderful critics who receive the award. So without further ado, Christian, come on up.
Thank you. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have like a speech, but thank you so much to Nate, to Kalundra, to Liz, to everyone on the committee, to everyone that read all these applications, to everyone at the ACTA. This is so great. I think supporting a diversification of who gets to be a critic and what we call a critic, and letting underrepresented critics get new platforms and awards and monetary support is so important right now. I was talking with Gloria just yesterday at a great thing that Critical Minded is doing about representation of theater critics, and was saying that like one of the biggest issues right now is opportunity for younger critics, for critics of color, for trans critics, for queer critics, for disabled critics, for so many things, and that an award like this helps remedy that problem in a nice, really caring gesture. So thank you so much.
And without further ado, let's have a Q&A. Picture really quick.
Picture,
All right,
yes.
absolutely.
1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Gloria, why don't you come on up and let's do this Q&A with you wonderful folk. And Christian, you don't have to hold the award the entire time, but you are more than welcome to if you would like.
Oh, thanks. I was like, I don't want to put it on the ground. It's too pretty.
Yeah. Hey. Hi. It's bright up here. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. All right, real, heard. Thank you all for coming out early this morning for this really incredible conversation we're about to have. Again, and congratulations to Christian. So incredible. Just to give a little brief bio from the internet. Christian Lewis is a critic and assistant professor. They study and teach about the intersection of disability, gender, queerness. Their work has been featured in Variety, Queerly, Into, American Theater Mag, where they actually had one of the top read articles critiquing Tootsie, which I thought was a great piece and needed, and we'll get into that. But yeah, read all the things they've done. It's needed and important. But let's get into it, shall we? Okay. No, of course, it was easy. You have a lot of accomplishments. I'd love to start with just the, bio, I think, of how you got into theater, how did theater find you? I think for, critics that come from more marginalized backgrounds, like our pathway in is often different. So I'm just curious as to how you became involved in this lovely sector.
Yeah, I was a feminine, very queer-looking acting child, and I think my mom was like, arts. When my dad was like, try sports, and that didn't go well. So my mom was like, we're gonna bring you to an audition to be a child in a community theater production of Oliver. And I was like, I've never even seen a show. And she was like, you're gonna like this. And I did. And from then on, I just did so much theater, and I really did find it like a refuge as a child, and just kept doing it. Yeah.
And where are you from originally?
I'm from Connecticut, super close to the city, and I grew up with my mom bringing me to matinees, so like I very much got like obsessed with theater very quickly as soon as I started being a little child in community theater productions.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, as a kid, what was your engagement with sort of theater critics or other sort of maybe like not so public-facing roles in theater? Were you of the theater talk generation? Like, how did you sort of discern the certain voices in the industry, if you did at all?
Yeah, I can't say that I was like up enough on that. As a kid, I was like part of the market that like Broadway is marketing tickets to, of like a bridge and tunnel crowd of like matinee moms. Like that was, so I was very much that, and so much of the like what I was gonna see was based on watching the Tonys and being like, oh my God, I need to go see that show. Yeah. So I was super like not aware as much of the backstage roles until I like got to college and got much more interested in journalism, and then started reading a lot more.
Okay. Did you study journalism in college?
So in college, I was an English and a drama major. I just like couldn't decide and wanted to do both, and decided I wanted to get my PhD and be an English professor, which is what I do now. But I was like so not willing to give up the theater stuff. And so throughout my life and in college, I was acting, choreographing, costume designing, dramaturging, doing so many different roles, and I didn't want to give that up. And I found theater criticism as a way to like use all of that experience and combine it with my English literary academic stuff and get to engage with that and still be like involved with the industry without like having to be on or backstage.
That's real. One question I had too was, do you remember what your first, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I was published and paid for it, but just in general, do you remember what your first piece of theater criticism was? And yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, in college, I founded an online queer magazine thing, and because of that, when I wanted to start theater journalism, I kind of had to hit up publicists for things that were queer or already open or something like that. And the first review I wrote was for a play at Lincoln Center called Dada Wolf Papa Hot, which anyone thought it's really good. It was a really good play, and so that was the first thing that I wrote. At the time, it was just published on my own little fancy blog that wasn't fancy, just a WordPress. But eventually I got to write unpaid for Huffington Post and got to put it up
Say
there.
that.
Yeah, I was an unpaid Huffington Post theater critic for a while, which nice byline, not nice paycheck.
That's so real. That's so real. I'm really curious for you, and if it's changed at all, I'd love to hear more. But what for you has been sort of the goal of your criticism? I think that, what's super great about reading your work, and if you, again, y'all really should read Christian's work, it really is excellent. But what's really interesting to read your work is that, obviously you cover a lot of theater made by queer, trans, GNC people, but you also cover across the season. And I'm wondering, when you write, do you have a goal for your criticism in general?
Yeah, so sometimes it's I got assigned a piece and I have to write a review of it, but then sometimes, and what I often get way more passionate about, it's pieces that I'm pitching or that I'm working with editors about, where I really want to say something and do some advocacy work and maybe critique a production that I think really should not be on stage, like Shutzi, or highlight a production that I think is doing really important work, like All of Me last season, for example. And so I hope that I can get to write more pieces where I get to say something beyond this is good, this is bad. And I think that the reason I still want to be a critic and I still want to do this, even though it's hard to support yourself as a freelancer and get paid and have outlets that even want to publish theater criticism right now, I really feel like I have something to say and that I want to have it out there. And so that's why I keep doing this.
I'm wondering, so I'd love to also speak a little bit about I want to talk a little bit now, I guess, about the trends in theater you're seeing, I feel as somebody who's really highly attuned to how theater is engaging with queer, trans, GNT artists, what are the trends you're seeing, within how we prioritize these stories, treat these artists, treat these stories as well. Especially it's interesting to have something like a Tootsie happen and then only a couple years later have an Oh Mary. I'm just wondering for you, how would you diagnose or talk about what's happening?
Yeah, so the piece that I submitted for this award was a very long essay that I wrote for Into, and one of my great editors, Matt Wexler's here. And it was looking at all of last season on and off Broadway and thinking about the trends in terms of queer and trans representation, and spoiler alert for Broadway, it was not good. And that the trend, I didn't go in with an idea, I just went in with an assignment. And I kept seeing all these shows and I was where are all the queer and trans characters? Where are these plots even going? And so it was not a great trend to see that theater felt like it was getting less queer last season, on Broadway especially, and that was scary and alarming, and now we just had an election, and that's scary and alarming. And this idea that I was afraid that producers out there are maybe thinking that queer and trans storylines are not only less universal, but could ruffle feathers and would maybe sell tickets less, which I both hope is not true, and I interviewed a lot of people and got a lot of stats for the piece from GLAAD and other organizations that doesn't actually seem true, that when surveyed, a lot of people say they're either neutral about queer and trans people on stage or they want to see more of them. So I hope more of that happens on Broadway. Off Broadway is a much more experimental, cool, queer, trans-friendly space, and there are a lot of great work. Everyone go see in the Amazon warehouse parking lot right now. Go see and support trans non-binary art out there that is casting in non-traditional ways and making space for stories in non-traditional ways. It is out there. It's just maybe not going to be on Broadway every season. And in terms of the Oh Mary example, I love that show so much and it means so much to me. And I wrote a review for Variety about it that it's very funny and gay and campy on the surface, but I also think it's a really compelling trans allegory and there's really deep stuff under all of that slapstick. And I think it matters that that show got to Broadway because of its like really massive queer following downtown, and that like if groups can like coalesce and make things hits off Broadway, it can maybe then get on Broadway. So I'd love to see that happen more.
Real. I have so many follow-ups to the other things you just said. I mean, one follow-up I have is I'm curious, like, and I know Broadway is and has never been the barometer of progress or change for multiple reasons, but I'm curious as to what do you think is the sort of dissonance between what audience members are saying they want versus what is actually then put on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of this is that like Broadway shows are in development for so long, and so like Broadway often, as you said, is not a great barometer because it's often like quite a few years behind social change, which is not great, even though in some ways it's like a very political and queer art form, but in other ways it's like quite behind. And also this is a like problem related to the fact that the people who are producers on Broadway are often like probably like the least diverse group of people in the theater industry. And so that's not helping that those are the people that have like so much power of what's being put on stage, which then can often cause this like really big dissonance between what people wish they were seeing on stage and what they are seeing on stage, why there's often like not that representation so many people, especially like young people, are craving on a Broadway stage. And then this gets back to the fact that like so many more people see Broadway than off-Broadway, and those exact like young people that wish they could see themselves on a Broadway stage, if instead they like went over to Playwrights or went over to New York Theater Workshop, they could maybe see themselves on stage, but they're so much more likely to see a Broadway show. So that also gets back to just like, I wish more people saw off-Broadway theater.
Real. Another question I had, and I want to talk a little bit now about the Tootsie article. First of all, really well written, shout out. One question I had was in your piece, you kind of, and I think in the very beginning of your piece, you kind of outlined how, you know, the production got mainly positive reviews, right? And how, you know, there wasn't really any acknowledgement of potential transphobia in the piece. I'm wondering, why do you think sort of these critiques when it comes to gender and queerness are often missed in criticism? Yeah.
To give a flippant but true answer is privilege. Almost all of the critics out there are cis, and a lot of them are straight, and they're missing these things, and they're not noticing it. Reading the Tootsie reviews, I felt like I was like being gaslit by the world, like how am I the only one? And I was not the only one, but how am I the only one seeing this is how I felt. So I was like, I have to write about this because it feels like everyone else somehow missed this. And that was like so upsetting. And then not too long after Mrs. Doubtfire came along, and there was a little bit of progress, and I hoped that a lot of other critics had read my piece, so maybe learned or thought about it a little bit, but not that much. And then we had Some Like It Hot, and everyone was back to kind of mostly uncritically thinking about that and not really like clocking transphobia in these various productions. So yeah, it's not great to have other people that are like not noticing things, and it happens in criticism all the time. Like so many white critics say like terribly racist things in their reviews, and they're not even realizing it, or are like not clocking racist things that are happening on stage. We have critics that can like write about characters and like misgender them, and a lot of like bad things can happen, and critics are just not always as aware as they should be, and like that's definitely why we need more critics from diverse backgrounds, because we need more experiences and people who are going to be able to see things on stage and understand it in different ways.
Real. I was wondering too, like, what was the reception to your piece? Did you ever hear from anybody involved with the production, or?
Oh,
yeah.
Very much not. And I am like aware that the producers were like horribly mad at me, and that I've definitely been like blacklisted from certain things in the industry because powerful producers got really mad at me. I'm not like giving myself complete credit, but you can look at Broadway grosses, they're very public, and from the day my piece came out, Tootsie's grosses started going down until they closed, and I'm very happy about that, selfishly. It is on tour, which is scary that it's going around the country, and I wish I could have stopped that as well. But yeah, no, they were certainly not happy about it. It got very, very popular online. It's like one of the most read things in American Theater Magazine, which is kind of wild to me. And it both like gave me a bigger platform online and had a lot of editors learn my name, and then I also got like a lot of death threats and transphobic comments, and the amount of like reporting and blocking I had to do on social media was a lot. And it's like, actually the reason I stopped using Facebook, because the Facebook post, just the like one time American Theater Magazine posted it, was like a wild, terrible place, and the comment section of the article also was like really like off the rails, so there was a lot of like really transphobic defensive responses to it. But they didn't respond directly. The closest I've gotten to a production responding to something that I've done was I wrote about Jagged Little Pill in the Brooklyn Rail, and then again in American Theater Magazine, about the way they really like erased the non-binary identity of one of the characters, and it became a really big deal. There was protests around it. There was a lot of, and they like released a statement about it. They did not mention me or my pieces about it, but they like released a statement and like were going to do some positive changes about it eventually. Lauren Patton still got to have her Tony and accept her Tony, and they didn't recast her. But on the tour that they did, they committed to casting non-binary people, so I hopefully helped with that.
Wait, what did the statement say?
It was like a very PR-y statement about like, we love and support the trans and non-binary community, and like this character is like on a gender journey, but we like support Lauren Patton, and yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
Not great, but I'm at least really happy that when the tour happened, they cast, and they had a slate of people, because it's a tour, so they have to have a lot of covers, a slate of people that were going to be non-binary and playing that role, and the other international productions of Jagged Little Pill have also done that. So even if Broadway was, and this Broadway production was unwilling to change and was really committed to Lauren Patton, I'm glad the other places listened a little bit more.
Having another question too, like I'm wondering, how do you, I don't know, like so many questions, y'all. One, I'm wondering like, how do you feel about sort of, you know, I mean, one, it's one thing to like write an article and have it go, you know, viral, and then they have death threats and all that horrible stuff, and then also for like the production not to even chat to you afterwards. Like, how do you feel about that sort of? Not even. It's almost like they didn't even see. Like, there's clearly seeing the reception. There's like clearly like a lack of humanity there, I feel like.
I know they read the piece.
Right.
But no, and it like, sadly it's a similar situation, because spoiler alert, Robert Horn won Best Book for Tootsie, and Santina Fontana won Best Actor. Like, the two things I had the biggest problems with were Tonys they won, and I think they knew they had a great shot at that. And so this idea of like, we don't want to engage with this trans non-binary critic who's talking about our production being transphobic, we'd instead rather just collect the awards. So it's definitely, yeah, hurtful that they didn't really care about the critique, because they were like, we can just make money and win an award. So that was, yeah, definitely not great. We can share a mic. Oh, look, you're good.
Just like that, professional.
Professional.
Thank you. No, that's so real. I mean, I'm also wondering too, like, you know, another kind of question I had too was, as a critic, like, how do you protect yourself during these moments? I mean, I think that there is a kind of this ongoing trend of, and it varies. I feel like oftentimes it is just like, you know, legacy critics hearing a lot of backlash from like actors and stuff, or from a community. But in this case, it felt it was very personal and stuff. And I'm wondering, how did you, as a critic and educator, you know, protect your vessel during these like really hateful moments?
That's a good question. And yeah, it did get really personal. Like, Santina Fontana like blocked me on Twitter, and like definitely like we'd see each other. I was like working the award circuit that year, so we'd like see each other at junkets, and it would be like a no kind of situation. Yeah, and how do I protect myself? I like for a while was like trying to be very social media engaged with the piece, but there was like so many really bad comments and things, and I had to kind of just like stop with that. And since in the larger pieces I've written about like Doubtfire and Jagged Little Pill, or Some Like It Hot, that like are upsetting a lot of people who want to defend shows, I like kind of like can't go in the comments anymore. I kind of have to like turn those notifications off on my phone. And then I also try to like talk, like when it came to Some Like It Hot, the recent one, I like talked to all of my trans friends about it before I wrote it, and I was like, how are we all feeling about this? Are you upset about this? Can we talk about this? And like, I try to care for myself. I have a really great partner. His name's Justin, and like, I bring him as my +1 all the time, and like, he's very caring. And I like knew going in to something like Some Like It Hot that it was going to be upsetting, and like having a really supportive +1 with me at the theater is often really helpful.
Shout out, Justin. Could you also just explain a little bit as to, kind of, for those who haven't seen the show, just to like give them context as to the part that you were critiquing in Some Like It Hot?
Yeah, so in Some Like It Hot, it was drawing on a similar thing from Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire of this idea that like man in a dress humor, like we can laugh at a man in a dress because he's so clearly not passing and is not a woman, and that's supposed to be funny. And so to have these moments of like Christian Borle like looking very ugly in his costume design and not supposed to look feminine and like doing a like fake feminine voice, and we're laughing at that, is rooted in this idea of like laughing at trans women and saying that like trans women are just men in dresses and that's something funny and not real. And then in terms of the other character that they certainly did work and tried to change, I just think it ended up being like not very clear and not very well done and very kind of wishy-washy about it, and I was just like not super happy with the way it was done, and they like rewrote the romance plot, and then the like rich guy became like a trans chaser and had all these like weird lyrics about how like he knew that Daphne was like not a woman, but he was super into that. So there was just like a lot that was like super, I felt like unresolved, underbaked in that. And then it was so upsetting to me that the writers did this piece with Playbill saying like, we did the work. And it was like they did not do the work, and they did not like talk to trans consultants and the people who saw it out of town. There was a whole piece about trans people who saw it out of town and had a ton of issues with it. So they just like, they didn't do the work. And I wish that, I would rather not write angry pieces about transphobic shows. I would rather those shows not exist, or I've been a dramaturg and a script consultant, and like hit me up in advance. I would rather help your show not be transphobic than have to write a piece saying it's transphobic.
Real, save us all some time, mess. Before we do a kind of Q&A shout out, I had two other questions. I mean, one, I'd love to hear more about the shows that you're celebrating and passionate about. I also saw Mary, Cole, you are amazing. The whole cast is fantastic. But let's just hear more about the shows that you are celebrating, and also just like if you've ever had the inverse experience where people have reached out to you and been like, wow, your review of our show was actually really, like, no one's spoken about it in this way before.
Yeah, Mary is so great. Like, not only I think is it a trans allegory, but to like have Cole, who's non-binary, and Bianca Lee, who's trans, in it, and to have the male characters in it all be like super gay. I just love the world that it has created, where like we don't really have like regular straight people or like regular cis people in that world, which I think is so cool. Another show that I saw this season that I really like, their like commitment to making us rethink how we think roles and diversity. The Romeo and Juliet Sam Gold production right now is really cool, and I think people should go see that. And then yeah, go see In the Amazon Warehouse Parking Lot at Playwrights. It is such a cool piece and such a cool way to like cast a world of we're just gonna have like queer, trans, some femme presenting people of like over 40, most of the cast, and it's like these are people who like don't get represented, don't get cast, and don't get shows written about them, and don't have roles, and so like it's such a great play to like create that space, which is great. And then in terms of the like actually getting positive response from the piece, yeah, I get a lot of that, and it like means so much to me that people are like, I was so mad about this and I thought no one else cared. And I'm so happy. And like in an ironic little twist of fate, I'm also an academic and I write scholarship about 19th century British literature, but my Tootsie piece in my theater journalism gets assigned in college classes more than my academic writing, which is funny. But when I try to get tenure someday, I can put that in the file anyway and be like, look, these people are assigning me, just not the stuff you thought they would. But I know like a lot of college professors that like assign my Tootsie piece and my Doubtfire, Jagged Little Pill company piece, and now my one about last season to like talk about other perspectives in theater and to talk about like tropes on stage, like the man in the dress. So I'm very happy that like there has been really positive response to it as well.
As they should. Also, shout out to Breaking the Binary, where
so good.
You know, great it's like they've really created a pipeline for trans GNC artists, so we love them.
We love them. They do a lot of great readings. In the Amazon warehouse parking lot is their first like full production that they've part of, but they do a lot of readings. They do a playwriting series. They're really, really great. So go support them.
Yes. And before we pass it for Q&As, I also wanted to ask, what are, you know, I'm gonna ask 2 questions in one, because coupon. I'm curious as to like, what are both challenges you face, but also what are things that you, like how can people watching this live stream, hey, with the, you know, the purse strings, like how can they support, what are things in general that you think, you know, critics from marginalized backgrounds, specifically, you know, trans, GNC, and queer artists could use as well?
Yeah, we need more opportunity and money. Pay us. Give us places to write for. If you are a staff critic somewhere, maybe give up an opportunity for one show that you were going to review and ask your editor, like, hey, could I have someone else review this? Could I have a younger, newer person who doesn't get to do this review this? I really want more outlets, period, that cover theater. I want more outlets that cover theater and really commit to diversity. I really love 3 Views that we've both written for. I'm writing my first 3 Views piece right after this tonight. The very idea of like putting multiple perspectives at the same time is really great, and committing to like diverse critics is really great. I was part of a website in a cohort called Did They Like It? That was a group of 5 of us critics who were all queer, trans, younger. Everyone but me was a person of color. And that was so great, and it didn't have enough funding. And so now they don't get to publish our reviews anymore. And so like people out there with money, like fund places that really commit to having diverse, underrepresented, marginalized critics covering theater criticism. And then for the people who already have power in the industry, mentorship and community, and yeah, maybe giving up an opportunity. Or even, I love a critical conversation. Like I'd love to like publish me, you, another person, have that, like put that all together, and then it can still, the editor can still feel like, oh, our like staff critic I trust is like also involved. So we just love, yeah, more opportunity.
Absolutely. And also just for people watching, 3 Views, again, a platform where it brings together people who make theater in any capacity. It could be a critic, actor, dramaturg, etc. And it provides 3 points of view on a piece. So look them up, they're great, shout out. Also,
and I love, sorry, I just gotta keep bragging about 3 Views. I love, and I know you're into this too, like really questioning and rethinking what exactly a critic can do even.
Yes.
So I love that 3 Views isn't just critics, but they, even for the critics, they're like, do you wanna write a personal essay? Do you wanna like do a photo essay? Do you wanna write like a narrative response to something? I like love rethinking. I don't think the only way to engage with a piece of art is to write 800 to 1,000 words. Like I think in a critical voice. I think there are a lot of different ways to do this. During the pandemic, I got really into like live tweeting criticism.
Yes.
I love like critical conversations. I think we really can like rethink who gets to be a critic, what criticism looks like, all of it.
absolutely. Like, I mean, bring back theater talk, but like with like non-white people, like more,
yes, please.
Yeah, LOL. Is there any audience questions that we can get to? Oh my gosh, look at all those hands. I see, let's do there and then I'll go here, yeah. I'll repeat it in the mic.
Looking at upcoming season of Nuyorican, are there any productions that sort of make your ears stand up and go, I should watch that because maybe they're going to do it right, maybe they won't?
Yeah. So the question was, looking at the upcoming season, are there any productions that make you think like, oh, I should watch that because maybe they'll do a good job, or maybe they will not do a good job?
Yeah, for 2 shout-outs, I am, shall we say, anxious, skeptical, ready to see Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. That has a character based on a real-life black trans woman, Lady Chablis, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm ready to celebrate it if it's great. I'm ready to critique it if it's not. I'll be at the ready, hopefully with an assignment from an editor, who knows. But I'm very down to write about it either way. But separately, I will shout out that everyone's ears should perk up and go get tickets. English by Sanas Tusi is one of my favorite plays that I've ever seen, period. It is so amazing, and it is opening on Broadway in January. So go see that. That is probably the thing I'm most excited for this season.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Other questions? Yes.
Sort of curious, how do you envision someone hot that would work for you, or do you think that the property itself is just not workable in 2024?
Yeah, the question was, how would you envision Some Like It Hot actually working for you, or do you think the property is not viable in our dear year of 2024?
Yeah, I get this question a lot about Tootsie, Doubtfire, and Some Like It Hot. And, sometimes beloved IP can stay as a VHS tape or a DVD, and we don't have to do it again. You could change it. You could make it about two people that realize they're trans and really find some gender euphoria in putting on women's clothing, which they did a little bit. But I honestly don't really see why we need to do that. An example I had for a solution to Mrs. Doubtfire that would let people keep a lot of what they love, sans the transphobia, is Mrs. Doubtfire, and especially in the musical, it's just about that character putting on disguises. There's no reason he needed to put on a female disguise. He could have been a male Scottish nanny, and it would have been the exact same thing, just not transphobic. So they could have done that, but they were committing to the bit of they love his fake boobs getting burned, and people applaud. So maybe let go of the nostalgia of some of those productions and let them be what they were at that time, and that accept that they're maybe not the most fitting for 2024. And likewise, instead of going back to an existing beloved IP, maybe commission a trans person to write a show about being trans instead of trying to shoehorn it into a old movie.
I was gonna say, are you interested in sort of seeing some of these shows come back and maybe in a non-problematic way, or do you as a critic, are you more interested in seeing shows that are new and actually include new voices? Maybe, yeah. I'm just curious about how do you view this question of nostalgia and hanging on to stories that are beloved but maybe not appropriate.
Yeah, I'm definitely more toward supporting people, trans people writing shows about trans people instead of trying to shoehorn it into something else. But that being said, my favorite piece of theater I've ever seen was Daniel Fish's Oklahoma. And I think if you are willing to let go of your nostalgia for a beautiful musical like Oklahoma and instead do something completely different with it, that's great. I think the way that Daniel Fish managed to make race as it relates to rape and incel culture part of Oklahoma was amazing. The way that he let Ado Annie be a commentary on, in the Broadway iteration of disability and sexuality at the same time was freaking amazing. And then the same when Sis did it on tour, getting it to be about Black trans women sexuality was so amazing. So I love a good revival, and I love a revival that changes things, but to do a full nostalgia remount, I'm not about that.
Real. Other questions? Ooh, let's go here and then we'll come over there. Yeah.
You've been leading a sort of one-person campaign.
Thank you.
Which is great, and opened my eyes to things. I haven't seen Tootsie or Mrs. Doubtfire. I'm thankful about that, but I did see Some Like It Hot and kind of loved it and appreciated what they attempted to do, but now I'm glad to see it again, and now my head's explode. But what do you think we as critics and those who are putting these shows together, we're not in your head, we're not seeing things the way others do, which is what makes this business kind of interesting. But we have to be respectful, to be open and be able to enjoy things together. But we don't all see things from the same perspective. So what do you suggest? Is there something that we could be doing besides just constantly asking a question? Is this appropriate?
The question, okay, I'm trying my best here. The question was, what can we as critics, and when you say we, do you mean cis het critics, or who's the we, or?
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't even thinking about the way. I'm just thinking
In general.
who isn't writing in the same
Real. I guess what can legacy critics outside of your perspective, I guess I'll phrase it like this, like how can they be critically engaging with shows even if they don't come from your positionality or and aren't in your head? Yeah.
That's a great question, and I'm happy that other people want to get on board with my one-person campaign sometimes. So, step one, have trans friends. Have diverse friends in your life and bring them to theater with you and talk about theater with them. The joy and the problem of theater criticism is how subjective it is. And like you said, it's one person's opinion, and we inherently are going to have different opinions than other people. And that's totally okay and valid, and all you can try to do is make your opinion informed and considerate. And if I see a show where it's about, and I'm assigned to review it, and I feel like I don't have the knowledge about this, I don't have the experience, I don't have these reference points, I'll tell an editor that sometimes, and I'll be like, I don't think I'm the one to review this, which I think more critics should do. Sometimes you should just say, I'm not the person for this. But also then I'll go out and do the work, and I'll find other people that saw it, or I'll bring other people to see it, and I will say, I didn't understand this. Can you explain that, bit of culture to me? Or can you explain that phrase to me that I didn't understand? Or how did you feel about this? Did you, vibe with this? Did this feel okay? So definitely talk to people more about it. I think the idea of a +1 is sacred, and you should take that +1 really, you should be really intentional about that and who you bring, and then any good +1 needs to have a long conversation afterwards with you about it to talk about that, because I think every review is better if you've talked about it with people first. So just talk about it with people before you write about it. Try to talk about people who maybe would have a different perspective from you before you write it. And then, sometimes just know that maybe you can bow out of a review if you feel like it's not something that's in your wheelhouse, which I've definitely done.
Real. And to be clear, you also review shows that are outside your positionality, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. If I was only reviewing shows about trans people, I would not be working that much. So yeah, and and often that's the case. And I don't think trans people should only have to write about trans art. I don't think black critics should only have to write about black playwrights and black plays. We should be able to write about all different things, but when we are experts on things, we're probably going to have more expert things to say. But yeah, I've had to write about all different things, and sometimes I have all the cultural touchstones, and sometimes I don't, and so I try to do the work when I don't know.
Yeah. Not to mention, even within trans GNC communities, there's so much diversity that also exists outside of one person's positionality. Totally. Who else has questions? Actually, I said, let's go here first, and then I'll go to you.
So I don't want to, and hey, it's Raven.
Ah, yes I do. Hello.
It's been a while. And I don't want to shift the spotlight to a different issue. But
No.
when I saw Mrs. Doubtfire, which was awful in every way, just even beyond the political stuff.
Agreed. It's also not a good musical.
Really bad, which I think made people not think about it critically in some ways. Do you know what I mean? It was specific. Anyway, but beyond the transphobia, I also thought it was incredibly misogynistic. I don't want to shift the spotlight because there's more privilege in being a cis woman. But I'm curious if you feel like in shows where you've seen transphobia, you often see misogyny too. Do you feel like they go hand in hand a lot?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just because I'm a woman and I'm reacting.
The question was, for shows that you see that feature transphobia, do they also feature things like misogyny?
Yeah, so especially to look at Tootsie, Doubtfire, and Some Like It Hot, it is no coincidence that it's not just transphobia, it's transmisogyny. And that transmisogyny is, as the word says, rooted both in a hatred of trans people and a hatred of women. And a mockery of women and womanhood and femininity. And so I am not shocked that in all three of those productions, there's really sexist plot lines about the cis female characters as well. The way that Tootsie wrote the Lily Cooper role was not great. The everything about the mom in Tootsie in Mrs. Doubtfire, was terribly written. Even there's a song in Mrs. Doubtfire when they're putting him in drag, and they have various models of femininity, and it was a terribly sexist song where they would have a cis woman in the ensemble be Donna Summer, and then they would have a male ensemble be Margaret Thatcher, and they'd be look, ugly women are basically just men. So yes, they absolutely go hand in hand, and it is not surprising to me at all that these shows that have trans misogyny also have a lot of regular old misogyny too.
Really? I have one question here. Yeah.
I appreciate hearing your point of view, and I'm really looking forward to reading your critiques of Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, and something like it on all of which I saw. But the one thing that really troubles me is your suggestion that because these shows make you uncomfortable, that they should be shut down. Because that reminds me too much of the attitudes on the other side of the political spectrum, that things that make those people uncomfortable should be shut down, censored, stopped. Can you address that?
So the question was, someone was curious about this idea that you may have suggested that shows that are troubling should be shut down, and that can be resonant on the other side among people who may view that shows, they don't like for whatever reasons should also be shut down. And would you mind just clarifying and addressing that?
Yeah, and the question, the phrase was that I was suggesting that the show should be shut down because it made me uncomfortable. And way more than making me uncomfortable, I think a show like Tootsie is doing a lot of real active harm to the trans community, and that it is spreading really hateful messages. And now that show is on tour and going around to states that are debating anti-trans laws, and in a country that our president-elect just spent a record amount of money, somewhere between $30 and $100 million on anti-trans ads. And so when there's a lot of political rhetoric in this country that's saying that trans people are groomers and are not really trans, and that trans isn't real, to have a show feed into that is beyond just uncomfortable. It's I think really dangerous. And so I don't think a show like that should happen. I do think shows that make people uncomfortable, period, should happen. I think you can learn a lot from theater when you're uncomfortable or when it's different from your views. But if I think a show is doing really active harm to a marginalized or an at-risk community, I don't think it should be happening. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a question of is this a difficult piece or is this a dangerous piece for me?
That's real. Other questions? I also think I'm wondering too, what do you view, and I hate asking this question, but at the same time I have to ask this question. I mean, I'm wondering what, what are the stakes, especially given the fact that we are in a country that, does violence against queer, trans, GNC people, is actively trying to suppress and take away rights and the right to even exist. And what do you think are the stakes when it comes to theater and the arts in general, and our responsibility there, and in turn your responsibility as a critic in general?
Yeah, so representation means a lot to people, and seeing yourself on stage means a lot to people. And I think it's important to have that right now when trans people are so at risk and being legislated against and denied human rights. And my role as a critic is to really critique and say that shows that are harmful to trans people should not be touring around the country and should not be given huge platforms and awards on Broadway, and then to highlight shows that are doing really good things and hoping that we can have more of that. Theater is a really great way to actively and sometimes sneakily be political. And so I think we need some, oh, I got it.
You got it.
Oh my God. Sorry. Theater can be a way to spread an important message, and I really, not to be all Brecht, but I really believe in the power of theater to be educational and to teach the masses something, and sometimes a sneaky and sometimes a not sneaky, not subtle way. But I think we need art that's teaching people they need to be nice to trans people and give them rights and understand them and be friends with them and all of that, not that they are actually just men in a dress and we should laugh at them.
Real. I see one more question, then we'll wrap it up. What's up?
Hi.
Here. I'm wondering, since we're a group of writers and editors, if you maybe could share with a bit more specificity what your process is, maybe more technically, of diving into some of these larger pieces. Are you looking at it from macro level first? Are you doing some script analysis and then trying to find the through line, etc.?
Yeah, the question was, can you just talk a bit more about your process and how you approach these pieces?
Yeah, I often approach these pieces from a combo of like a dramaturg mindset and like a literary analysis mindset, which is kind of like what I'm doing in my academic life. So it often comes down to like pretty intense script, close reading stuff that I then have to often like pull back when I actually write it, so I don't have like nitpicking little lines that I'm sure you've seen as an editor of mine. So then I like start usually really close and really deep and really specific performance moments, really specific moments in the text, and then try to zoom out a bit bigger and always try to like help a piece go beyond, I hate this line or this character isn't written well, to be like, okay, what is this actually doing? How is the audience responding? What like impact could this piece have, positive or negative? So trying to like get a good sense of scale there of meeting like specific things I want to celebrate or have issues with, and then trying to think bigger about how we can use the show for change in a good or bad way.
Real. And as a final question, I'm wondering, where can the people find you? You know, should they Google? Do they mail? Like, what should they do?
Yeah, send mail too. No, just kidding. My fan mail PO box is no.
Yes.
Sadly, for better or for worse, the platform I am most active on is Twitter/X, which is just terrible.
So sorry.
I know. When everyone moves on to like one nice thing, I will move on to that one nice thing. But it's hard like having a platform and then needing to change that platform when that platform is owned by a terrible transphobic person. But anyway, at C. Lewis Reviews, CLEWISREVIEWS. I think I'd be able to spell reviews easier than that. And then also, yeah, you can Google me. Right now, like this season, I'll be writing that I know of for Variety, for Into, for 3 Views. So those are some of the places you can see me coming up.
Great. Can we please give a round of applause?
Thank you so much.
Christian. Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you to both of you. I'm pinch hitting for David briefly, who has been having a planes, trains, and automobile effort to get here, thanks to the subway system. So we're going to take a few minutes break, set up for